everyone, nice to sort of meet you virtually. Alison asked me to talk a bit about why media and cultural studies. So I'm going to talk very generally, but also maybe taking on board anybody who hasn't studied media and cultural studies in the past, which is quite possible, but has done a social science degree or an arts or humanities degree and is thinking about this to open up their learning. And I wanted to just focus quickly on why media and cultural studies, why now? So this word now means a lot to cultural studies. And the study of what's happening right now and a particular moment in time means a lot to us. So you'll see a lot of other programs in media and media studies that are more communications based, that are maybe more practical based, but media and cultural studies is really a focus on the moment and moments of social change. So in a way, we're living through a key moment for cultural studies as well. So I just thought I'd reflect quickly on three things you will have seen in the media right now, or three things you will have experienced, and just suggest some of the ways in which we might think about it and approach it from a kind of media and cultural studies point of view. So just three easy topics off the top of my head that should all be recognisable to you too. I'm just trying to move my screen forward. There we go. There's so much going on my screen, I can't find the arrow button. So one of the things we might think about, I don't know if anybody saw this news item this week, but the social media platform TikTok launched a campaign potentially through very young people. TikTok has a very young audience, aged between sort of 14 to maybe 21. Who launched a campaign to get people to reserve tickets for the Trump rally so that there'd be empty seats, and there were. And this is an interesting moment in time, and we might think about what's led us here. So in media studies, we think about questions of democracy. One of the most important functions for democracy is to have an independent press, to have an independent media organisation, to inform the public so that we can think and know and understand who we are. And one of the most powerful men in the world at the moment in the States is a president that's come from and has been trained through reality television. So how might we think about that? How might we think of a president who has learned these different ways of performing that are different to other regimes of learning how to be presidential, as he has a different training background in many ways, a business background and a background where he learned his kind of media art, if you want to call it that, through reality television and through being spectacular. This is also a president at war with traditional forms of media. He's at war with the traditional big news networks. He doesn't trust them and expects them to be on his side. He's a president who uses a platform no other leadership has really used. He's used Twitter in a way that's remarkable. And he's also a president that's a product of these huge changes between the way media organisations used to work and the way they work now. So we used to have fairly few media organisations that distributed to many people. We now, some of those conglomerates have broken up. We have more diffuse platforms, we have more social media platforms, and traditional types of telling the news and telling us what was happening have changed because journalism and journalistic practices have changed. And so those older mechanisms and questions around professionalism and telling the truth have become under challenge through a shift to social media platforms, publicity, and the idea that anyone can make the news now. So we're in a situation where we have this phrase fake news that we really understand. We understand that much of what we see isn't real because there is less of a set of filtering mechanisms that news media needs to go through before it reaches us. So the fact that we know that and the fact that we're familiar with that phrase tells us something about what's going on in the world at the moment. And it also tells us something about the dire and desperate need for media literacy and media literacy in our schools, if you're interested in teaching. but that's another topic that I'm quite passionate about. So here we have a moment where it's a TikTok campaign that perhaps offers some of the biggest challenges in a kind of more democratic fashion. So whilst on the one hand, large media organisations might be under threat, on the other hand, other interesting things are happening that you might think of as coming from below, or as coming from a different mode of thinking. So there's lots of different things going on there that create this particular moment that we're in now. And if we study media studies, and if we study cultural studies in particular, we're interested in this nowness. We're often interested in these potentials where things might change. And the other thing you will have seen across your TV screens, across your Twitter feeds, across your social media platforms right now, has been the resurgence of the longer-running Black Lives Matter campaign. Now, this is a campaign that gained more and more accessibility through the Twitter platform and through the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And there's a lot of work thinking about the way in which social movements are enabled by technologies, are enabled by new media technologies. So if you read a lot about experiences of racism, a lot of the arguments will tell you it's not that there's now more racism, it's now that we can see more racism because people carry phones, because people carry the ability to record what's happening to them. So if you think back to, you may remember the LA riots in the 90s or have heard about them, one of the reasons in which they got a lot of prominence was because of television, because of the arrival and because of the dominance of television. Now we're in a situation where the personalised camera phone can distribute through social media evidence of what's going on in what we sometimes call citizen journalism. And at play in a lot of things that are happening in the Black Lives Matter moment as well is the role of popular culture, the role of popular music, the role of popular sports stars, as you can see there, who are using their symbolic power to draw attention, to recirculate and to globalise some of these ideas, which we hope are seeds for social change. So studying cultural studies is always dynamic, and it always involves loads of these different forces coming together at any particular one moment in time. And then just finally, my third little example is to get you to think about now, to get you to think about what is happening under COVID. Now we're at home. Now we're at home, maybe the media is more vital than ever. It is now, we live in a world where we use this phrase mediatization, which suggests that almost everything we do is mediatized. We have personalized technology. We have media that comes to us heavily targeted by an algorithm. How does this shape who we are? How does this help structure the way we live? How many photos do you have on your phone? How much time do you spend connected to somebody else? How many times do you check into media? How do you think about curating your life and archiving your life on media? How many times does it take you to take a photograph? And how many filters do you use before you put it up there? Because we're all encouraged to be our own micro celebrities. And how much more intensified is this under COVID? And there's quite a lot of research projects happening now to try and think about how this condition of lockdown, of being in the home and connected, might be intensifying all these media practices that were already saturating our daily lives. So they're just three things for us to think about in a bigger context of lots of change. So what we want you to do if you do media and cultural studies at Lancaster is to become a media and cultural analyst, to be critical, which means analysing, engaging with theory, drawing on case studies like the ones I've described, be creative, have ideas, generate new ideas, think about how culture might look differently. You have some access to doing some practical production, to try and think about podcasts and maybe some visual storytelling. But you are always, as I hope you've seen just through those few examples, you are always working at an interdisciplinary level. You're always thinking about text, arts, drawing from politics, drawing from economics, drawing from sociology. And this is because we analyse what we call the conjuncture, the moment, how different forces come together to create this current moment, and we ask you to intervene, to be creative and thinking of alternative ways of producing culture and thinking about our everyday lives. So I guess what's different about doing cultural studies than other forms of maybe media and communication is this really dynamic approach to cultural analysis. And I hope that excites you, because it really excites me. Okay, that's all I want to say.